The History Things podcast is brought to you by TR Historical, your one-stop shop for all your historical fan gear needs. Visit trhistorical.com and use the promo code HistoryThings to receive 10% off your next purchase. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the show.
Are you ready?
Welcome back to the History Things podcast, field video exclusive Battle of Fredericksburg, sponsored by TR Historical, your one-stop shop for all your history fan gear needs. Joining us still, Avery Lentz, host of the Battles and Banter podcast. We've been having a great day interpreting the action of the Fredericksburg campaign all the way up, honestly, from the end of the Maryland campaign through the Loudoun Valley, river crossings, street fighting, made some pretty significant attacks and breakthroughs that could have been exploited, should have been exploited perhaps, over on the Prospect Hill Slaughter Pen Farm area of the battlefield. And now we're here for the penultimate live stream that we're doing today from the Battle of Fredericksburg. We're here at Willis Hill. We're here at the famous stone wall, which we'll get into here. But when you're thinking of the Battle of Fredericksburg, you're most likely thinking of this scene, this fight here, this sweeping 900 yards or so of open terrain that the Union forces are going to make assault after assault against this, this stone wall here, which has Confederate defenders firmly entrenched on the other side. So Avery is going to pick us up here on the fighting at the sort of the more one-sided part of the field, you could say. So Avery, take it away, big guy.
So this is the area of the battlefield that probably gets the most attention, thanks to the gods and generals. And I will say that scene was very well done. However, it did not have enough smoke. So I know a lot of people when you come here and they say, how could anyone have survived an open ground like this in this situation? Well, think about the discharging muskets, think about the discharging of artillery. You're gonna have a lot of smoke lingering in the air, not to mention it is wintertime, so it gets dark earlier. So a lot of the units that are making the attack after 4 o'clock are doing so at dusk, and some of the units are out here in twilight. And it's a very interesting kind of situation to be in, especially considering the temperatures that fluctuate during the day of December 13th. Right. But these attacks start around the same time that the attacks on Prospect Hill happened. They were supposed to be simultaneous, and they were supposed to kind of help each other out. But the Union forces that attack in this position have a very difficult position. First of all, they have to attack out of the streets of Fredericksburg, which means they have to come out of those bottleneck streets, get out into the open, form up in their battle lines, all under fire, and then march forward. They have about 900 yards from the streets of Fredericksburg to the very wall behind us there to advance. And in the middle of that 900 yards, you're going to have a small canal ditch, a drainage ditch that connects the canal to, is it Hazel Run?
I believe it's Hazel Run, yeah.
And so those two bodies of water, though, that I just mentioned, the canal and Hazel Run, they're going to be a problem. They're going to create a geographical funnel, which means we can't really go to the north, we can't go really that far to the south, because we will mess up our lines. The railroad also wraps around that way too. So men have to come through this one spot of ground. They also have to cross that drainage ditch like I mentioned, but once they get up and over that, they got to cross through what was known as the Stratton Fairgrounds, the areas where there had been fairs here in Fredericksburg, and they're coming up on this road here, which was just called the Sunken Road. It connected to the Telegraph Road, which is right over here. And over time, farmers had used this lane to get from Telegraph Road to George Street and William Street over to our north. So from all this traveling that had been done over this time, the Sunken Road behind us had been sunk down. And with the stones on the road being piled up on the side of the road, it unintentionally formed a stone wall. And this is where the Confederates will be. It's going to be Thomas R.R. Cobb's Georgia Brigade. They will be nestled in the road here, and because of its position, you can put one brigade of soldiers here, and they will be pretty comfortably tucked in. And also, if you notice from behind us, that road's not at the base of the hill. It's on the slope. We're not quite there yet, and that's because the topography here is very complicated. And so due to that, you have Confederates that are also going to be on top of the hill, the artillery. First major guns are the Washington artillery. Prior to these attacks, they had actually gone out into the open ground and put stakes, and they had actually bracketed all that open ground. They have their guns pre-sighted. It's so accurate to their standards that E.P. Alexander, one of the chief artillerists here, he's going to say that not even a chicken could live once they opened up.
That's the end of the movie.
Yes. And so this is going to be Longstreet's position.
Chicken
James
could live on that field.
Mr. James Longstreet, his troops here, he's got this job, and he can see that he's at a very advantageous position. So advantageous that ironically enough, whopping 7 months later, at Gettysburg, he'll find himself in the reverse of this situation, and probably why he's not very keen to attack there. But that's another story.
For a different day.
But what's even more even interesting about this is that the first two Union waves coming at us, first two Union divisions, are going to be the 2nd Corps divisions of William Blinky French and Winfield Scott Hancock. And why those names should mean something is because it was Hancock and French's divisions that had also attacked the Sunken Road in a previous battle, which was
Antietam.
Which
at
I
Antietam.
thought we had I thought we owned Sunken Roads as far as the Civil War. And then I found out, I was like, oh, every battlefield's got one
Sunken
somewhere.
Road.
Yeah,
Yes.
But
Now, Blinky French, he's got his troops there at Antietam, but Hancock himself won't take over Israel Richardson's division until late in that fight. But you're
Richardson's
absolutely right.
killed, Hancock.
Right.
Yeah. Point is that these are the two units that had made that attack at Antietam and had been successful. So it makes sense that they would be selected to make this charge. The Union is aware that this is a sunken road, obviously. And now they're selecting these two units that have had the experience assaulting a similar position with the same extensive casualties.
Yep.
But they had been successful at Antietam, so why would they not be successful here?
Different terrain.
Different terrain, not to mention Union artillery is way too far back. It cannot accurately support the Union infantry as they go forward.
And not to state the obvious, guys, but stones are a hell of a lot more sturdy than rail fences and earth. So, more stout defenses here that the attackers, the Federal troops being, are going to make themselves commit to.
And the Confederate guns of the Washington artillery on top of the hill, they are also going to be shooting over the heads of their own men, so that's also another advantage. They don't have to worry about any friendly fire incidents. The one disadvantage the Confederates will have here is that once Cobb's guys exhaust their ammunition, once they've sustained pretty significant casualties, they're going to get reinforcements from different brigades. Just to name a few, you got Alfred Scales' North Carolinians, you have Joseph Kershaw's South Carolinians, Abner Perrin and some of his Alabamians are going to come down the hill. But like I said, right there, they got to come down that slope behind us to reinforce that road. And that is going to be some of the most dangerous moments for any Confederate on this side of the battlefield, is getting into the Sunken Road. Once they're in, they're relatively safe, but they have to get down that slope. One individual regiment at one point on December 13th, that's the 3rd South Carolina, it's going to lose 7 officers in nearly 15 seconds coming down that hill. Right like that. I mean, it's rough. And that's because the Union forces, once they make these charges, they're going to have to fall back to really the only cover they can find, which is a small swale about 500 yards back from where we're standing.
It provides almost no cover.
Absolutely not.
It's
But
some.
they can at least see the guys coming off the hill, so that's where they're going to shoot at. But as I'm getting back on topic here, French and Hancock, their divisions are going to make the first couple charges here between 10 and 12 on December 13th. French's guys go first. All 3 of his divisions are committed to this fight. We're going to have Nathan Kimball, Oliver Palmer, and John Andrews. All of their brigades will go forward, and each brigade will sustain a punishment for about between 20 to 30 minutes each. And because of the topography, they can only send in 1 brigade at a time. They're going to be shoulder to shoulder, and basically, we got another World War I plane, I think, above us, but that's okay. The point is that each brigade, as they go forward, they're going to have to sustain this punishment. They can't maneuver anywhere else. They have to come straight at the wall. And once they take this punishment, they're going to fall back and then go to ground. And that means they're going to ground so the other brigade behind them can go forward. It becomes almost a machine mechanized relay system here for the Union. Pretty much. And on that note, the Confederates have a very similar system inside the wall. They have 3 rows of men. The first row is against the wall itself. They're the shooters. The men behind them are the relayers, passing stuff back and forth, but also secondary shooters as well. And then the final row is men that are loading muskets, passing canteens forward, And this kind of relay system that the Confederates have going all day, and every unit that comes into the Sunken Road produces a volume of fire of almost 10,000 bullets fired per minute. That's insane.
Absolutely.
That is like World War I, World War II style rates of fire.
Right.
And so with that in mind, that's another thing that people go, how could anyone survive here? Well, with that much musket fire, it's incredible anyone could see anybody out here. The smoke would have obscured the views around here. There's also a series of houses along the Sunken Road, the Ennis house and the Martha Stevens house being among them. They will be riddled with bullets. They'll have shells through it. One guy in particular, Mr. Cobb himself, Thomas R.R. Cobb of Georgia. He's our 1st Brigade commander here. He won't come out to play.
Is that T.R. Cobb?
Cobb is T.R.R. Cobb.
T.R.R. Cobb.
Yes,
Not to be confused with T.R. Historical, our sponsor.
Yes.
Woo-hoo!
Yes,
Product
this guy
placement.
here will be standing in front of the Martha Stevens house to my left, and he will be basically conversing with another brigade commander about feeding reinforcements into the road. And that is when a shell fired from Stafford Heights flies over the river, over the town, over all these killing fields.
Past Grandma's house.
Enters the back of Martha Stevens' house, flies through it, exits out the front door, explodes in the road right in front of Cobb. I think fate was coming for him that day. So it would seem. And Cobb is going to take a mortal wound. The shell will sever his femoral artery. He will be dead 20 minutes later. He will be one of 1,000 Confederate casualties in the road and in this position as a whole. On the other side of it, however, you're going to have roughly 8,000 Union soldiers killed or wounded in this assault. Now, once French's attack is done, you have Hancock's troops come forward. Their division will actually take the worst casualties of the 8,000. They're going to lose 2,000. So they take a quarter of the casualties of all the units that attack here. You're going to have John Codwell, Samuel Zook, and of course more famously Thomas Marr's Irish Brigade. These men have faced a lot of stigma at this point in the Union Army. Because of their status as Irish immigrants, they have had to face rumors that they are drunks, that they're cowards, not very good fighters. But I think at Antietam they proved they're pretty significant fighters, and here they prove it even more. Because of the 1,500 men that go forward, or excuse me, of the 1,200 men that go forward, nearly 526 will not come back.
And this is a unit that makes it perhaps closest to the wall in their advances.
According to some accounts, they get within 50 to even 30 yards. There's going to be a lot of Union units that claim they get the closest. The Irish Brigade is one of them. Andrew Humphrey's guys are another. We'll get to him in a second. But the Irish Brigade is going to have such a brave charge that it is said that even the Confederates on the opposite side of the wall are going to commend their bravery. One of the companies on the 24th Georgia is a company of a lot of Confederate Irish immigrants that came. Yes, Kelly's Irish Legion. And so these are the guys that you see in Gods and Generals that have a very over-the-top dramatic scene, but they were here in the road at the time of the battle, but very unlikely that they were upset at each other, and more likely they were trying to tear each other's heads off. But I digress. After Hancock's
it was less romantic than the movie makes it out.
Yes,
exactly. It was spectacular, but it was a violent fight, and everybody understood that they were in the middle of a war. So remember that when you watch the movie. There's a lot of Hollywood.
So by noon, both of these divisions' assaults have failed. So at this point, I believe Burnside realizes, okay, if my two crack units that have had experience against taking Sunken Roads just failed here, well then we're going to have to feed in more reinforcements and try again. And this time you're going to have Oliver Howard's division going forward. And that's important because guess what? Two of his brigades, Norman J. Hall, Joshua Owen, the Philadelphia Brigade, and the men, including the 7th Michigan, they had that tough job on December 11th.
Right.
Here they are making this charge going into the mid-afternoon.
2 days later.
2 days later. They're also going to be joined by a division of the 9th Union Corps. That's Samuel Sturgis's division. They have Edward Ferrero and James Nagel. Ferrero I like to mention because he will later be the commander of the USCT division in the Army of the Potomac going through the Overland Campaign. But his men are going to be making charges here in support. So now we're pulling from another corps to make this assault. The 2nd Corps is almost completely engaged with the exception of Alfred Sully's brigade. He will absolutely refuse to get his men up to within 100 yards of the wall. He says it was murder to do so. So now you're going to start seeing in the early afternoon officers refusing to make this charge. And Howard and Sturgis's attack meets with the same result that French and Hancock met with. And this is a very troublesome situation because these units are getting clobbered out here. They're taking horrendous casualties. And because of that mechanized kind of relay system we have here, every time a brigade falls back, they have to step over the guys that are hunkered down as they go forward. This is creating a cluster jam in the lowlands.
Good sense.
Oh, woo.
Good self-sense.
Yes, and this is becoming a problem because with all these disorganized units, they can't make a stout defense in the case of a counterattack. James Longstreet decides to pull a Stonewall Jackson and counterattack here. Those men will not be able to hold it back. There is a significant danger, and Burnside realizes this. He realizes that there is a crisis unfolding on this side of the field due to these horrendous casualties. So what will he do? He decides we have to keep assaulting this position. We have to wait until nightfall so we can safely pull back using the cover of darkness, which means until dark, which at this time of year, about 4:30.
4:30, 5 o'clock, the sun is going bye-bye.
We need to keep the Confederates in their defensive positions, and the only way to do that is to attack them aggressively. So when Howard and Sturgis falls back, you have finally the fourth wave of assaults going forward. That's going to be Mr. Charles Griffin's division. And at this point, we're using a completely different Grand Division. The Center Grand Division is taking over. That's Joseph Hooker's troops. It's mainly the 5th Corps troops that are going to be utilized in this fight. It's going to be Charles Griffin's whole division. And that's James Barnes, Jacob Schweitzer, and Thomas Stockton. Stockton's guys, of course, contain the famous 20th Maine. And so they're going to be attacking in later afternoon. The sun is going down. Movie did get that pretty well with that famous scene of them going forward at sundown.
That's 1862, right? That regiment was formed that summer.
That summer. This is their baptism of fire.
In Maine.
20th Maine is going to face its baptism of fire. I don't know how many men they go into battle with. I believe it's not their full strength because they are facing a lot of sick cases. It's going to get worse during the winter between 62, 63. But they're going to take pretty significant casualties, as were most of the regiments here.
Yes.
And here, their attack's different because everyone tries to get up there as once. They're also going to be joined by Samuel Carroll's brigade from Emil Whipple's division of the 3rd Corps. So, yeah, we had mentioned the 3rd Corps heavily engaged with Birney's guys down at the slaughter pen. Here we have another 3rd Corps unit all the way over here. It just shows just how spread out a lot of these units are. Not everyone's in the same spot. But now Burnside is pulling from units that are immobile and trying to feed them in here to try to occupy the Confederates.
Again, we're buying time to darkness. Like, there's no other option at this point.
And perhaps probably the most unique attack of the entire day comes with Andrew A. Humphrey's division of Pennsylvania. He's got 2 brigades under Peter Alleback and Erastus Tyler. Eustace Tyler, sorry. There's Erastus Keyes, Erasmus. You know, it's crazy. Eustace Tyler is basically it. So 2 brigades of 100-day volunteers. They were brought in during the Antietam campaign, during the Maryland campaign, because of the threat to Washington and everything. And their enlistments are almost out. Well, guess what? You're going into battle here at Fredericksburg. This is your baptism of fire if you're in Humphrey's division. Imagine being a soldier in that unit, standing on the outskirts of Fredericksburg, looking out at these killing fields that you're about to cross over, littered with blue bodies of men falling back, broken, tattered, whatnot, smoke obscuring everything, shells landing all around you. That's got to be a terrifying situation. Well, these guys go forward, according to Humphreys, with the discipline of veterans. And they're going to have a very unique attack pattern. Unlike the massive battle lines that we've seen, they get themselves into column formation. And they're actually going to come up to my left. They're going to use these 2 houses to kind of screen their movements. And they're going to come directly at those houses. And as they go forward, they have a stroke of luck. The Washington artillery around 4:30 is going to run out of ammo. So they're pulled off the line, and E.P. Alexander's guns are going to come forward. And as they're getting set up, here come Humphrey's Pennsylvanians. They are not under artillery fire for most of the way. By the time the Confederate infantry joins in, at this point, Cobb's guys have been retired. It's now mostly North Carolinian and South Carolinians firing at them. You're going to see these Pennsylvania Green troops, 100-day volunteers, get, according to them, 20 yards away from the stone wall. Now, I'm sure that's just for a few companies. I'm sure that's not for the entire division. But regardless, you have men dashing to the houses themselves and shooting directly around the corner. Smoke also helps obscure your movement so you can get as close as you can. But they're going to stand there for about 45 minutes and take this punishing assault. And Humphreys, as he's doing this, is going to be whistling tunes called I Will Be Gay and Happy Still, trying to impose that he's not intimidated by this battle, trying to reassure his men with his bravery. At one point, his son, Henry Humphreys, is going to be wounded. He slaps him on the back, basically says, hey, that's chip off the old block, I'm proud of you, and that's about all the concern he shows. But his famous horse, his favorite horse, Charlie, is shot out from underneath him, and then he's remembered as yelling a string of slurs and epitaphs at the Confederates for his fallen steed. So he's more torn up about the horse than his own son, and to be fair, I probably would be too. That's why I'm not a dad. Point is that Humphreys' attack, as they are withdrawing, he actually will start singing I Will Be Fat and Greasy Still. as they withdraw, and all the soldiers join in because they don't know what else to do. The general's singing kind of insanely here as they withdraw under fire, and the rest of the division chimes in. So the whole division of Pennsylvanians in their first battle leave the battlefield here singing merrily. And it's so weird that the Confederates and their accounts will say they sent the Yankees howling at the end of the day. One more attack takes place, and it's a much smaller scale. It's going to be Rush Hawkins' brigade, one of the regiments, the 89th New York, made the crossing under fire at Middle Crossing. And so this brigade is going to be further to my right, down along the Telegraph Road. When they attack, it's pretty much dark out here. And they're going to get pretty darn close to the other side of the Telegraph Road. And they're right at the angle of the stone wall in the main Confederate line. Cannons are basically angled directly down on top of them and are shooting into the darkness on the fields below. Hawkins' guys are going to stand there for about 30 minutes between 5 and 5:30, and then they fall back. So I've just described every single wave of attack here, and each one meets the same result. Some units get closer than others, but ultimately the Union forces are repulsed here with significant casualties. And that's not even the end of the suffering, because as night falls, this temperature that we're dealing with now disappears, and it becomes 30 degrees really quickly. Men had their frock coats, as Pat had mentioned earlier, because now they're pulling them on. But if the men didn't have them, they're just taken from the bodies around them. It is cold. It's darn cold.
Now, Avery, I'm glad you mentioned all of those attacks in that great detail, because one of the folks that are attacking up here is a gentleman with the 110th Pennsylvania Infantry. Now, he's 3rd Corps, so again, not where most of the rest of the 3rd Corps is at.
It's got to be Carroll's guys.
It is from Carroll's troops. That's exactly right, Avery. And this is going to be James Hamilton, and he actually wrote a letter to his parents just prior to the assault, and I want to read you a chunk of that now. He wrote them, "Dear parents, this may be the last line you will ever have from me, for I know, as sure as the sun rises, if we cross an attack here, one half of us must fall. Oh, how I wish we had General Shields, who they had been successful with earlier in 1862. Somehow I would feel more safe with him in command. I never could understand why they took him from us. Just now, while I write, the very earth is trembling with the awful roar of cannon. The heavens are livid with the light of the flashing on the sky. Bright, fleecy clouds roll away in the evening shade, luminous with light from the cannon flash. All day for miles up and down the river has the cannon roared. Now, don't think I am finding fault. I know that for what I say, I have good reason. I simply fear the consequences to our army and country. Yours with great reverence, as ever, your loving son."
Wow.
Now, these soldiers, as Avery has so aptly described, are going to be thrown back. Now, Hamilton himself will survive the attacks here. This is the first major fight that the 110th PA will have had since earlier in the spring, since fighting in the Shenandoah Valley campaign, actually. Now, they're going to be thrown back with these other federal troops, and as was being described, there would be thousands upon thousands of wounded and dead men stretched out in front of this small stone wall. And that night, something fascinating is going to happen. Not only is the temperature dropping, but it's going to drop fast, and it's an incredibly clear night. And that's going to have what occur?
So the Northern Lights are going to make their way all the way down to the Mid-Atlantic region.
Aurora Borealis.
Now, as Pat said earlier today, I'm actually from Michigan. I've seen the Northern Lights back home. It's very, very rare for them to get down here into the Mid-Atlantic region. Yep. And we do have both sides commenting on this event.
Yeah, we do.
The Confederate papers are going to write about it extensively, but this quote actually comes from a gentleman in the Richmond Howitzers, stating that the heavens were hanging out their banners and streamers and setting off fireworks in honor of our victory. Yeah, exactly. Another often quoted officer that's out here, and actually Pat alluded to him a little bit a moment ago, is of course the Lieutenant Colonel of the 20th Maine, Joshua Chamberlain. He himself would write eloquently about the Aurora Borealis going on above his head, because he and many of his men are actually still out here that evening. They're hunkering down on the line of battle. Chamberlain wrote later on about having dead men on either side of him and making something of a little barricade out of their corpses.
In the case of a Confederate counterattack.
Right.
Many people wonder why they were still out here at dark and why they didn't just pull back. We have to still contain the line.
That's right.
This is still no man's land. and we can't just fall back.
Our position is tenuous, but we're holding this for now.
Now, Chamberlain would actually go on, and I won't, it's a lengthy quote, so I'll just paraphrase.
As Chamberlain
As Chamberlain does. He would actually go on to write of the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights, stating that it was as if the heavens themselves were weeping and they were laying out the garland on a, what's the term he uses? Pagan holiday. So a very dramatic, kind of hearkening back to almost a Viking era with his descriptions.
Also puts into perspective the two mentalities at play here, right? Because one side knows they just one-handedly, and the other side knows they are just taking a very significant sort of lashing here. So you have, one thinking there's a celebration happening above their head, and the other one thinking this is a mourning, a lamentation.
Yep.
Solemn word.
I like it.
Now, unless you guys have anything that you want to add, I'm thinking we're going to head up the hill itself to the National Cemetery, where we can wrap things up with our presentation here at the 158th commemoration of the Battle of Fredericksburg.